In today's lesson, we are going to take some of the measurement skills that we have learned in this chapter and combine it with our prior knowledge of solving 1- and 2-step word problems. Our objective for the day says, students will be able to add, subtract, multiply, or divide to solve problems involving liquid volumes or masses. Although we do not have any new vocabulary words for the day, I want you to take a minute and think of the keywords for each math operation we know. So think of keywords that remind you of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Now you've had a little bit of time to think, but before we move on, I will review some of those keywords with you. Addition words can include sum, total, in all together. For subtraction, you may hear the words difference, less than, take away, fewer, left over, remain, how many more. Multiplication words could be each, in all, total, product. And finally, some division keywords are split, quotient, divisor, equal group, separate, divided by, share equally, distribute, cut up. Now that we have reviewed our keywords for today's lesson, we are ready to move on to being math detectives and solving word problem mysteries. Here is our first problem. It says, a restaurant serves lemonade from a large container that can hold 24 liters. Sadie will fill the pitchers of lemonade shown below. Will Sadie have lemonade left over after filling the container? Now that we have read the word problem, we know that we need to find the important numbers. In this example, we find the important numbers by looking at the picture. Let's figure out how many liters of lemonade are in each pitcher. We can see that the first one has 7 liters because the lemonade ends at the 7-liter line. The same is true for the rest of the other 3 containers. Now we can read this next bit of information to help us figure out if Sadie will have any lemonade left over after filling the container. Again, the first one has 7 liters, and so do all the rest. Since there are 4 equal groups of 7 liters, we can multiply. We can see that there are 4 pitchers of lemonade, and they all have 7 liters of lemonade. Like the information already tells us, we can multiply because these are equal groups. So we can do 4 times 7 equals 28. Now we need to decide whether or not Sadie will have lemonade left over after she fills the container. 28 liters, or the total amount of liters of lemonade she had, is greater than the 24 liters that the container can hold. So we know that Sadie will have lemonade left over. Here's the next example that we will do. These will get a little bit easier as we keep going. Ariel's recipe calls for 64 grams of apples and 86 grams of oranges. How many more grams of oranges than apples does the recipe call for? We need to look for important numbers and those math keywords so that we can figure out what kind of math we need to do. We can see that the question the problem is asking says how many more. That tells us that we need to do subtraction. Now we can circle the important numbers. The first important number we see is 64, which is the grams of apples that Ariel will need for her recipe. We also need to circle 86, which is the grams of oranges needed for the recipe. Since we already have the subtraction equation set up, now we need to plug in the numbers where they belong. We can see again that the problem says how many more grams of oranges than apples. That means we need to put the grams of oranges first, so 86, and the apples second, which is 64. Now we can subtract apples from oranges. We're going to do 86 minus 64. When we do that subtraction, we get 22. That means that 22 more grams of oranges are needed than apples for the recipe. Alright, let's move on to our next example. This example says, Dan's Clams restaurant sold 45 liters of lemonade. If it sold the same amount each hour for 9 hours, how many liters of lemonade did Dan's Clams sell each hour? We need to look for the keywords that tell us the type of equation we need to set up. We see the keyword each, which tells us that we could be doing multiplication or division. When we take a quick glance back at the numbers in the problem, though, we see that there is a number for the total amount of liters of lemonade, as well as a number that represents the number of hours the lemonade was sold. That means we will be splitting apart the total, and division is the operation that lets us do that. Now we need to circle those important numbers that we just talked about. The first one is 45, which again represents the total number of liters of lemonade that Dan's Clams sold. The other important number that we see is 9, which represents the amount of hours the lemonade was sold. Finally, we need to plug those numbers into the equation that we started to set up. We know that if we are setting up a division equation, the total needs to go first. So 45. Then we need to divide by the other number, which is 9. So now we need to do 45 divided by 9. You can use the strategy that works best for you to solve. You could use skip counting, drawing equal groups, drawing an array. You choose. Take a little bit of time to solve on your own. Once you have used your strategy to find out that 45 divided by 9 is 5, that means that Dan's Clams sold 5 liters of lemonade each of the 9 hours. You guys are doing awesome. We have just 2 more examples to go for the day. This example says, Sasha's box holds 4 kilograms of napkins and 29 kilograms of napkin rings. What is the total mass of the napkins and napkin rings? Again, we need to start by finding the keywords that tell us the type of math we need to do to solve the problem. In this problem, we see the word total. Total usually tells us that we need to do multiplication or addition, but we can also see that the word and is between the 2 important numbers, which tells us we need to put together those important numbers. That means we need to do addition. Now we can circle the important numbers. The first one is 4, which stands for the kilograms of napkins that can be stored in the box. And the other important number is 29, which is the kilograms of napkin rings that can be kept in the box. We are ready to add those 2 numbers together. So 4 plus 29. When we add those together, we get 33, which means that the total mass of items that the box can hold is 33 kilograms. Now we are ready for our last example. Before you move on and try a few of these on your own, the problem says, Josh has 6 buckets for cleaning a restaurant. He fills each bucket with 4 liters of water. How many liters of water are in the buckets? Again, in this problem, we see the keyword each, and we also see how many. That tells us that we are either going to be needing to do multiplication or division. When we look at our important numbers, we see that there are some buckets that each have the same amount of water. That sounds an awful lot like equal groups, which would tell us that we need to do multiplication. Now we can find the important numbers. First is 6, which represents the total number of buckets that will be used for cleaning the restaurant. The other important number that we see is 4, which represents the liters of water that will go in each bucket. Let's plug those numbers into the equation we've started to set up. 6 groups, or buckets, of 4 liters of water. Now we can do 6 times 4 using the strategy of your choice. Remember, you can use skip counting, you can draw equal groups, you can draw an array, you choose. After you have used your strategy, you see that 6 times 4 is 24, which means that 24 liters of water are in the buckets and can be used to clean the restaurant. Now it is time to move on to your learning check for today. Remember that you need to take your time when you are solving word problems. This is something that has been hard for us this year, but you can do it. Look for keywords, circle the important numbers, and show your work on a scratch paper. When you do your learning check, it is going to ask you to write an equation and solve a problem. That means that just like in this PowerPoint, you need to have the whole problem, not just the answer. Good luck!